So let's talk a little bit about costs. Regardless, as we see in our title, of the model or type of inventory, what are the inventory management related costs to consider potentially? What's important in this section is for people, students, to look at the potential costs that are out there and decide which ones are most relevant to their business and be able to zero in on them. So we're creating a frame of reference here as it relates to different costs around inventory management. Of course, one of the first is ordering costs. The people that are acquiring inventory, be it raw materials or finished goods or sub-assemblies, everything that we talked about, that clerical and admin support, purchasing activities. Now clearly, and we'll see this again when we talk about things like economic order quantities moving forward, ordering costs have gone down. Technology has enabled companies to drive down the costs associated with placing an order on a vendor to acquire inventory. That's what we're talking about here. But they still have to be considered. Now, carrying costs, a little different situation, but all of the different expenses associated, as the name would indicate, with carrying inventory. Things like cost of capital. If we have to go out and borrow money to acquire inventory, to pay vendors overseas, there's a cost associated with that, the cost of capital, the interest on the working capital loans that we might, or even longer term loans that we might need. Opportunity cost, a little harder to measure, but what we're saying here is that for every dollar we invest in inventory, that's a dollar that can't be invested somewhere else. So decisions going back to a previous discussion on what is the total dollar amount to be invested in inventory, opportunity cost needs to be part of that discussion. Leases on buildings, warehouses, distribution centers, payroll specific to labor around inventory management and logistics. The systems costs, all of this visibility that we've talked about, all of these software tools can be pretty expensive, and the integration and maintenance thereof can be equally expensive. You have to figure that in there. Materials handling equipment, forklifts and pallet jacks, palletizing equipment, things of that nature, maintenance activities, and the supplies to run for what some companies add up to millions of square feet of warehousing activity around the world. So we want to be able to identify what these potential costs are and put students in a position to isolate them as it relates specifically to their situation, be it now or in the future. Some other inventory management related costs to consider, and these become really important in an international environment. Transportation costs, ocean freight, air freight, which is considerably more expensive than ocean freight, surface, be it truck or rail in Europe or the United States or Asia. One cost that companies oftentimes overlook and can have an adverse effect on their bottom line are product returns and what are referred to as reverse logistics. Sometimes we have to recover inventory out in the field, whether there's a product recall or we're in the consumer electronics business and we have products that break and are on warranty. We have to be thinking about those returns and reverse logistics programs specific to the nature of the products that we're selling. Talked a little bit about risk management, bullet point number 2. You have to absolutely have a risk management program specific to inventories around the world. Things like theft, pilferage, damage, again, what comes down to risk of loss or damage to the goods, insurance costs, and all of the security that goes into taking care of our inventory. These are other costs to consider. And then the final bullet point here, while admittedly more difficult to measure, stock out costs, where we have customers, be it B2B customers or B2C, retail customers, good to go, ready to make a purchase, and we don't have the merchandise, a stock out cost. So maybe we have to expedite transport. We're late for back to school, we're in the retail business, be it wearing apparel or school supplies. For whatever reason, our deliveries are late. We have to convert ocean cargo from our vendors in Asia to air freight. That's expedited transport. And maybe even in a domestic environment, we have to put team drivers to move goods from California to Atlanta. That's another example of expedited transport. Back order processing. We're not able to complete orders immediately. We have to deal with back orders. There's an expense associated with that. One that's probably the most difficult to measure are lost sales. Customers walk into our store, they want to buy a product, they don't find it, they turn around and walk out. That's a stock out cost, and unless the customer says something, almost impossible to identify and calculate. And then over time, goodness forbid, the value of the depletion of customer goodwill. That's basically a scenario where a customer tries to buy from us a couple of different times for whatever reason. We don't have the merchandise. Again, doesn't matter. B2B, B2C environment, and the customer just gives up. That's the ultimate in the depletion of customer goodwill. How do you measure that? Very difficult to do.